A very good Wednesday morning to you, and welcome to the Fixed Wing Guy channel with me, Stuart Lomas. I hope I find you very well on what is a beautiful late summer day here in Manchester. Before we crack on, been away for a few days. We all know the reason why, so shan't dwell on that. Secondly, sorry about that. I have been promising this for a while. It is going to be one of my verbal essays, and it's going to be on a subject that I've been toying with the idea of making a video for quite a while. A number of people have mentioned it, but it's a subject that is actually quite tricky, not only for us as makers and viewers, but for the scientific world. And it's something that this is my fourth attempt of trying to make this video, and it's actually quite hard to compress it into a watchable length, but I will do my best. So string theory, I've written a few notes, so if it looks like I'm reading, I am. String theory first postulated in the 1970s. It's one of those theories that's causing a bit of problems in the scientific world right now, because it seems to rub against some accepted theories in physics which physicians or physicists don't like, because they have been living under the same rules for many years, and they don't seem to get on too well with any new upstart that pops its head over the parapet, as it were. So what is a string? Well, basically, it's a one-dimensional filament of energy. They come in two forms. They come in an open-ended string, which is just basically like a piece of string, and they come in closed end strings, which, as the name suggests, the ends are closed together, looking like a loop, or if you twist it, it looks like the figure of 8, which is like the eternal shape. So there you've got type 1 and type 2 strings. The closed end string are quite interesting because they seem to open up a number of different possibilities, but because this is kind of a new field of exploration for physics, I kind of shan't go down that route. The closed end strings seem to be quite important because physicists believe that they may help describe gravity in a slightly different way. Obviously, we're all aware of Newton's law, and we all just call it the force of gravity, but there is no great description as to what that force is. We know that we are attracted to the Earth, the Moon is attracted to the Earth and the other planets are attracted to the Sun, and so on and so forth. We just take it as read. But what string theory actually says is something like that: if the strings are made up of strings of matter, particles, it would seem to make sense that something that is made up of particles can indeed have an effect on something else that is made of particles, and everything else is made of particles of one thing or another. So that kind of seems to make sense why a particular force, for want of a better word, i.e. the strings of particles, would have a direct effect on something else, a planet for instance, that is also made up of particles. Like for like will give that that pull as far as gravity is concerned, because there is a relationship between the two. It's been realised, perhaps, to make string theory work, that the strings need to be on something I've referred to before in my, I think it was my time travel video, where I talked about interdimensional travel and the kind of dimensions that we know are existing right now: 1 dimensions, 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, which we live in. 4th dimension is time, and so on and so forth. And I talked about these sheets looking a little bit like the obelisk in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where if indeed they do exist, the universes are attached to one or the other side of these obelisks, as it were. and that denotes what kind of universe you live in. So if you're attached to the first one, you live in a one-dimensional universe, two, a two-dimensional, three, a three-dimensional, us, for instance, and so on and so forth. And what they seem to think is that to make string theory work properly in the real world is that they will have to be attached to one of these sheets, or as they're more rightly called, membranes, or as physicists now like to call them, brains. So if you hear a physicist referring to a brain, he's not talking about this, he's talking about a membrane, a sheet, these obelisk type things. And what they're basically saying is that if a string attaches itself to a membrane, it will, by nature of attaching itself to a particular membrane, will, as it holds a one-dimensional existence within itself, when it attaches itself to another membrane, it will become a two-dimensional string. I'll put a little apology in here because I'm kind of going to go into the world of quantum physics here, and there's a rule, our old saying as far as quantum physics is, as soon as you think you have a handle on quantum physics, it's completely clear that you've got completely the wrong end of the stick, because it's so complex and contradictory that it's very, very hard to ever get a full handle on it. Let me give you an example. Quantum physics basically says that nothing is solid, for instance. But have you ever tried to run through a brick wall? Difficult. But they say that everything is made up of particles of some description, but around those particles there's a lot of empty space. So in effect, although a brick is made up of particles, there's a lot of particles, but there's a hell of a lot more of empty space. So in theory, you should be able to walk right through it because there is more by ratio of empty space than there is of particles. So you've got a little bit of a paradox thing going on there, and this is why quantum physics tends to do people's noodles in over time. Where string theory kind of comes in this whole kind of melee of science is that there tends to be two accepted fields of physics. There is the quantum, the field of the very small, and there is the relative, which is basically everything else. So that makes life very easy to kind of wrap your head around. So you've got quantum, small, relative, everything else. Everything else is relative to the small. So there you go. And what they're thinking is that if string theory can be proven to be a workable theory, it will unify everything, and it will unify everything under the banner of what they're calling quantum gravity, as string theory kind of over the years, they are hopeful, brings things together, as it were. It will bring a unifying element to what are the major forces, accepted theories in the world of physics. And those basically are the known universe, the theory of electromagnetivity, strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and gravity. And they're kind of hoping that string theory, once it gains the traction that it needs, because it's struggling right now because it seems to be such a bit of a out there theory, they're hoping that it will bring all this together, which ties in nicely with what Stephen Hawking is trying to do right now, which is struggling to do because of his physical problems. What he wants to do before he dies is come up with a piece of mathematics, something as simple as E equals mc squared, for instance, which he will call the theory of everything. That something will become universally known like Einstein's theory, but that little piece of physics maths will just tie everything up quite nicely, and he wants that to be his lifetime achievement. So where physicists are at the moment, or more correctly, quantum physicists are at the moment, they believe that the embracing of string theory will enable both the quantum world and the relative world to come together under this unifying banner. Why it's important is that it's believed that when the universe was born, and you can check out my views on the Big Bang Theory. I did make a video of that 3 months ago, maybe. Have a look, check it out. And these the forces that I was just referring to were at their strongest. They were all described by strings reacting to each other. A little bit like crossing the beams in Ghostbusters. They make it very clear in Ghostbusters that you should never cross the streams on the machines that they have on the back because of the massive effect that can have on the universe. Well, they seem to think that in the beginning, sound like the Bible, all these known forces were the outcome of strings coming into contact with each other, and we don't know that for certain, because if we did know it for certain, then string theory wouldn't be a string theory, it would be a string fact. But that's what they kind of believe, is that the strings interacting with each other right at the beginning of space-time is what caused all the well-established and well-known forces, so the known universe, the electromagnetic force, the strong nuclear force, the weak magnetic force, the weak nuclear force, and gravity. But they do think that all of that came about because of interactions of these strings of energetic particles right at the beginning. String theory predicts that there is a vital connection between both known particle types in the universe called bosons. So you're looking at kind of the God particle that CERN are looking for at the moment, sort of the Higgs boson. And the other kind of particles called, I've not written this down, fermions. They're sometimes called supersymmetry. Supersymmetry demands, as you can imagine, that everything there will have to be a set pattern, an equal pattern, a reflection of, that it demands that all these bosons are linked to fermions, and vice versa, and neither can exist without the other. But unfortunately, this is the reason that this link has not yet been detected, because it is so hard to detect certainly the particles they know that are out there. You can know deep in your heart that they're out there. The prime example of is the Higgs boson. They see no reason why the Higgs boson doesn't exist or can't be proven to be existed. Hence, if you believe them, that firing the particles in opposite directions around the particle accelerator at CERN and hitting each other at some 180-degree point around the accelerator will cause a huge reaction, which will show the existence of the Higgs boson. This is the reason, because it can't be detected, why CERN as a body kind of exists, as it were. That is its raison d'etre, as it were. That's its reason for being. And the reason this has not happened is that there's been not enough energy to create the particle up until now. Yes, there's been other particle accelerators. I think there's one in America. Is it Philadelphia? Somewhere like that. But compared to CERN, it's small. I think it's probably only about 3 or 4 miles in diameter, whereas CERN is 16 miles. And it's not able to generate the power that's necessary to create these particles we're looking for. So they created CERN to do solely that job. So if CERN works, and if the particles are possible, they would have been kind of readily available when the universe was younger, as it were. So we won't know that the Higgs boson exists until CERN detects it. At that point, we will have a fair idea whether string theory holds water, and if it holds water, whether string theory was responsible for those strings coming into contact with each other to create all the major forces, the 5 forces that I referred to a few minutes ago, that exist. So it could all be that, dependent on CERN's outcome, the way the universe is right now is solely down to, or mainly down to, the existence of these strings. So, and these strings that are causing so much consternation in the world of science right now. So we've got these things that a lot of people just don't believe exist. We've got these things that a lot of people believe exist. But these things that, you know, are going to make such a massive difference in the world of physics, should they exist. So it's quite key on what CERN find out, whether the bosons do exist, and if the bosons do exist, it's very, very likely that string theory is correct, because string theory would have been key in making everything we see in the sky at night. String theory only makes sense in a world of more than 3 space dimensions, really. Our universe has 3, so string theory seems to support that we exist. So again, if string theory exists, it would seem to quantify and ratify that we can exist in the universe that we live in. Therefore, as a stretch, does it mean that if it ratifies the universe in which we live, does it make it more real that there could be the potential of other universes? Does it make those any more real because we've discovered that string theory exists? M theory, or multiverse theory, obviously ties into this quite nicely. Again, something I touched in my time travel video. M theory has got a lot of followers. It's also got a lot of detractors. But as we've just said, is that if string theory is proved to be correct, which should be inevitable if the Higgs boson is found, then if that's the case, and if string theory works well or the most efficiently in a 3-dimensional universe, i.e. our universe, then it's inescapable, certainly to me, that if it works well in our universe, then it must work well in other universes. So it's kind of underpinning our existence, and I know we unless you believe that we live in a matrix, that we do live in a 3-dimensional universe, because we can, touch stuff and feel stuff and bang stuff. It is 3-dimensional. It just makes it all the more real that there are more universes out there for us to explore, and maybe to discover perhaps that a lot of the people, or aliens as we like to call them, are not actually aliens from other solar systems, as it were, but potentially, as is being postulated right now, that they are interdimensional beings. They found a way to cross over the sheets or membranes or brains or whatever. They're finding that, but that's going off the subject. Current research to try to kind of bring this to an end is showing that using string theory, these may be detectable as they are believed to be bigger than first thought. So what they're saying is that they obviously, because you're working in the quantum world, they assume that everything was kind of ultra microscopic, as it were. But what they're now postulating is that these things may well be visible to electron microscopes and things like that, where they are going to detect them that little bit easier. So I'll finish this off kind of by saying where I see string theory is that it's a theory for me that kind of holds water. It's a theory for me that kind of is a bit of a pivot point on so many things. If CERN detect the Higgs boson, and that then passes on to basically saying, well, if the Higgs boson exists, as we think they do, then the chances are that string theory exists, and the chances are that string theory caused, due to their interaction with other strings, all the major forces that we know of that are around in the universe, that they are so important to the birth of the universe as we know it. And not only our universe, but because the physicists are now talking about the brains being involved, but other universes. So, as we said right at the beginning, it appears that string theory is going to be this unifying force with quantum gravity, string theory, M theory, pulling everything together, where if we're really lucky, we're going to have an actual understanding of what happened immediately after the Big Bang, how all the forces that make our universe and dictate how we live our lives, as it were formed, and that it will make the life of the quantum physicist that little bit easier, because searching for them, if these things are proved to exist, so we've got the boson and then obviously the strings, it will make their search for them that little bit easier. And on a kind of personal note, I kind of am hopeful that that will be the case, because that if that is the case, it will allow Stephen Hawking to hopefully complete his belief that there is a theory of everything, that there will just be this one piece of maths, as memorable as E equals MC squared, that will just explain how it all works. And I know to you and I, when we're shopping at Tesco or Walmart or wherever we do our shopping on a daily basis, that kind of doesn't mean a lot. But for me, who's got an interest in these things, and I'm sure a lot of you guys, it's actually quite interesting to feel that something that we kind of all feel a little bit detached from, this thing at CERN, and because we're so downtrodden by all the conspiracy theorists talking about opening up a portal to let the devil in and that kind of thing, we forget that actually what they could be doing is vital research into the birth of the universe, and at the end of it, how you and I, all got here, and how all the magnificent forces that play on us in the universe on a day-to-day basis work, and whether that can help us with future exploration, how to access not only more of space, but different dimensions, which is a completely different thing. And obviously the next one that we need to conquer, of course, the fourth dimension, time, to see whether we're able ever to contact worlds that were before ours and after ours, to see what we can do. So it seems like string theory, although it's this dim and distant idea in the brain of some mad quantum physicist out there, it's actually quite important and actually quite interesting. So I kind of hope that I've given you an overview, because that's all this can be, an overview of what strings are, these little filaments of energized particles that seem to have such a massive influence, or would appear to have such a massive influence on us, what we are, where we live. And when we look up there at night, all this stuff that we see could have all been created by tiny, tiny little strings of energy. Who knows? So anyway, that's it for this one. Sorry it was a rambly one, but I knew it was going to be big. I will look forward greatly to your questions, queries, suggestions, because as I always say for this type of video, your theories are as valid as mine. Your theories are as valid as Stephen Hawking's, because nobody really knows. It is best guess. So thank you very much for watching this. Thank you very much to my new subscribers that have arrived over the last couple of days. I think I've contacted all of you. By all means, let me know if I haven't, and I do apologise. Questions, queries, comments on this one, very, very welcome. Pop them down below. Any suggestions for this kind of nonsense, down below. And I shall be speaking to you again soon, and hopefully more less brain taxing stuff on the horizon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.